The last time the Toronto Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup, Elvis Presley was at his peak. Gas was only 33 cents, and the world had yet to witness a man walk on the moon. It was a time of jukeboxes, rotary phones, and black and white television sets. Since then, the NHL has expanded 26 teams and has changed drastically. Yet, as the decades rolled by, one thing remained the same: the Toronto Maple Leafs choking in the playoffs. Despite the evolution of the game and the addition of new teams and new rules, the Maple Leafs found themselves repeatedly falling short when it mattered most. From heartbreaking defeats to monumental collapses, each playoff season seemed to end in a familiar disappointment. As other franchises tasted the sweet nectar of championship glory, Toronto remained trapped in a seemingly endless cycle of hope and heartache, forever haunted by the ghosts of past failures. The 1966-1967 season was the last truly successful season of the Toronto Maple Leafs franchise. Led by Terry Sawchuk and Tim Horton, the real Tim Horton, the Leafs finished third in the league, and that was enough to make the playoffs, as 4 of the 6 teams in the league did. They then took on the number 1 seed Chicago Blackhawks, who had a plus 94 goal differential, compared to the Maple Leafs' minus 7 differential. But despite being outmatched, the Leafs beat the Blackhawks in 6 games, moving on to the Stanley Cup final against the Montreal Canadiens. The Leafs then made quick work of the Habs, winning in 6 games and capturing the Stanley Cup. This win in the Cup final also marked the last time the Maple Leafs were in a Stanley Cup final. Nearly 30 years later, and the Maple Leafs found themselves with another well-built roster. This one led by Doug Gilmour, who put up 127 points in the regular season, and goaltender Felix Potvin, who led the league in save percentage at just 21 years of age. Adding to the team's strength were newcomers Dave Andreychuk and Darren Puppa, who made significant contributions. Andreychuk made an immediate impact, scoring 25 goals and providing 13 assists in just 31 games after joining the team. Meanwhile, Puppa, excellent in goal, won 6 out of 8 games with the Leafs. The Leafs then finished the regular season with a franchise-best 44 wins, good for 8th in the league. They then beat their division rivals Red Wings in 7 games in the first round. Then they went on to beat the Blues in 7 games to move on to the conference finals. But their luck ran out against the Gretzky-led Kings, as they fell in 7 games after being up 3-2 in the series. Despite the heartbreaking loss in the previous season, the Leafs built on it. Doug Gilmour again led the way with 111 points, followed by Andreychuk's 99. The Leafs finished their season with a record of 43 wins, 29 losses, 12 ties for 98 points. The team opened the regular season with 10 consecutive wins, and then found themselves facing the Chicago Blackhawks in the first round, who they defeated in 6 games. Then they were set to face the 8th-seeded San Jose Sharks, beating them in 7 games, before losing again in the conference finals to the Vancouver Canucks in just 5 games. Losing in back-to-back conference finals broke the hearts of Leaf Nation. If only they knew what they were in for. 2004 is one of the most talked about Maple Leaf seasons, and it's not for any good reason. The Maple Leafs had a solid performance, finishing second in the Northeast Division with 103 points, the highest in franchise history. They won 45 games, lost 24, tied 10, and had 3 overtime losses. In the playoffs, they beat the Ottawa Senators in 7 games in the first round, but lost to the Philadelphia Flyers in the second round 4 games to 2. So why are we talking about this season? Well, this season is the one that would set up 20 years of turmoil for Leafs fans. The Leafs then didn't make the playoffs again until the 2012-2013 season. The 2012-13 Maple Leafs was impacted by a lockout, reducing the regular season from 82 games to 48 games. As a result, they only faced teams from their Eastern Conference. They played their division rivals, the Boston Bruins and Buffalo Sabres, 4 times each, and the Montreal Canadiens and Ottawa Senators 5 times each. They then played non-divisional Eastern Conference teams 3 times each. The regular season was highlighted by great performances from Phil Kessel, who was over a point per game, and amazing goaltending from James Reimer, who posted a .924 save percentage and won 19 of his 31 starts. The Leafs had a regular season record of 26-17-5, booking their ticket to the 2013 playoffs, where they would face their rivals, the Boston Bruins. The Leafs went down early 3-1, getting outscored 15-9 in those games. But the Leafs battled back with 2 hard-fought games. This set the stage for a great Game 7 in TD Garden, and what a great game it was, at least for one team. All seemed to be going well for the Leafs as Nazem Kadri extended their lead to 4-1 after burying a rebound goal with 14:31 left in the third period. The Bruins were crushed as this lead seemed to be insurmountable. As the clock continued to wind down, it seemed like the end was near for the Bruins season. But suddenly at 9:18 of the third period, Nathan Horton found the back of the net, cutting the deficit to just 2 goals. But time was still ticking. Then, with just 1:22 left on the clock, Milan Lucic buried a goal on the doorstep, putting the Bruins within striking distance. Then, with 50.2 seconds remaining, Patrice Bergeron fluttered a shot from the point that found the back of the net, tying the game.
Bergeron with a high side and score! Bruins have scored to tie the game!
And just like that, we were set for overtime, which only lasted a bit over 6 minutes.
Again, it never got all the way through. Now Marchand with it. Hands it off. Bergeron is on. Rebound chance in front. Sagan is there. Puck comes free. Score! Patrice Bergeron, who tied the game and won it in overtime. Incredible.
The 2017 season was full of hope for Toronto. They had a new young core of Mitch Marner, William Nylander, and the Calder-winning Austin Matthews. After a hard-fought season, the Leafs clinched the playoffs for the first time since that brutal collapse in 2013. They were set to play Alexander Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals. By Game 5, this series was tied up 2 games apiece, but unfortunately, the Leafs would lose the next 2 games in overtime by the scores 2-1. But it's fine, right? This team's young, and they should have no trouble getting it done in the future. 2018 saw the Maple Leafs set a franchise record of 49 wins and clinch the playoffs for the 2nd year in a row. Again, led by their young guns Marner, Matthews, and Nylander, the Leafs felt confident going into this postseason. But the playoffs saw them face the Boston Bruins, a team they know all too well. Unfortunately, they dropped Game 4 and went down 3-1 in the series. They then played with their backs against the wall and won Games 5 and Game 6, forcing a Game 7 in Boston. But their hope quickly faded as Toronto got killed 7-4 in Game 7 after playing 2 great games in Games 5 and 6. The Leafs followed that Game 7 loss with a huge offseason. They lost team veterans like Tyler Bozak, James Van Riemsdyk, and Leo Komarov, while adding all-star center John Tavares in free agency. And many people called that one of the biggest signings in NHL history.
Do you think this is the biggest signing in Leaf history?
Well, I'll tell you, let's put it this way. It's the biggest sighting since they last won the Stanley Cup.
So with the hometown boy on the team and the 3-headed monster turning into an elite trio, the Leafs were destined for a great season. And they had a great season. They dropped 100 points and clinched their 3rd straight playoff berth, only to play Boston again in the first round. But these playoffs were different for the Leafs. They had some playoff experience under their belts, and they had a new talent that they hoped would lead them on a deep run. For the first 5 games of the series, the Leafs and Bruins traded wins, resulting in a 3-2 series lead for Toronto. The Leafs then went back home with a chance to clinch a second-round appearance on home ice. And of course, they choked it. But no worries, they still have a chance to win in Game 7 in Boston. They lost 5-1. The 2020 season was cut short due to COVID, resulting in the Maple Leafs only playing 70 games. Still, they finished 8th in the Eastern Conference, which would advance them to the 2020 Stanley Cup qualifying round in the bubble. They were matched up against the Columbus Blue Jackets in the best-of-5 qualifying round. They traded shutouts the first 2 games and then traded overtime wins in which they both blew 3-0 leads and then lost 4-3 in overtime, forcing a winner-takes-all Game 5. And again, like we've seen so many times before, the Maple Leafs failed to show up when it mattered most, failing to register a single goal, losing 3-0. The next year was a 56-game division-only schedule due to the league still dealing with COVID restrictions. The 2021 playoffs were supposed to be it for the Leafs. They won the North Division that was full of Canadian teams, and were set to play the Montreal Canadiens, who, if you added up losses and overtime losses, finished way below 500. The hopes were so high for the Leafs this year that they even had a documentary made about the team titled All or Nothing. Well, it turns out they got nothing. The heavily favored Leafs blew a 3-1 series lead to their arch rivals with 3 consecutive losses to lose in Game 7, making this arguably one of the most embarrassing chokes for the Leafs. 2022, however, finally saw the NHL go back to an 82-game schedule, and the Leafs finished with 115 points and 54 wins, both franchise records. Despite this success, the Leafs finished in second place in the Atlantic Division, behind the President's Trophy winning Panthers. This second-place division finish put them up against the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Tampa Bay Lightning. Going into Game 6, the Leafs found themselves sitting in a position to clinch the series, being up 3-2. But of course, it wouldn't be the Leafs if the series didn't go 7.
Shot taken, Campbell, what a save!
And it really wouldn't be the Leafs if they didn't lose in 7.
Mills put it in front, and the Lightning have held on!
2023 was almost an exact replica of the previous season. The Leafs finished second in the division and were set to take on the Lightning yet again. The Leafs found themselves up 3-1 in the series and were going home to Toronto looking to close the series in 5 games. But Leafs fans watched in horror as their team dropped Game 5, making the series 3-2. In Game 6, Toronto flipped the script and finally exercised their demons off an overtime winning goal from the hometown hero.
Coming out in front, John scores! John Tavares! They finally caught lightning in a bottle! And the Maple Leafs have broken the 19-year curse!
They finally did it. They got past the first round. Maybe they can actually go on and win their first cup in nearly 60 years. But of course not. They lost in 5 games to the Florida Panthers. Now, the most recent postseason, 2024. The Leafs finished off another successful regular season, led by an almost 70-goal scorer, Austin Matthews. They clinched their 8th playoff berth in a row, and were set to play, you guessed it, the Boston Bruins. Everyone knew this would be a good series. Since 2013, they had met 3 times in the first round, with all series going 7 games. The Leafs then blew Game 1 and got smoked, but they responded with a close win in Game 2 to even the series. And in true Leafs fashion, they lost the next 2 games to go down 3-1 in the series. But Boston and Toronto are set to go 7 games. It's in the script. So, after an overtime win in Game 5 and a strong Game 6 win, both teams would head to Boston for a classic Game 7 in TD Garden. The Leafs got first blood, just for the Bruins to tie the game a minute later.
Top of the net, on top of the net, scores! Boston's tied it. We go to overtime in Game 7.
For the Bruins, losing this game would mark the second year in a row where they would blow a 3-1 series lead and lose Game 7 in overtime. For the Leafs, a loss here would mark a 4th Game 7 loss to the Bruins in 12 seasons and another first-round exit. Well, it ended up being the latter.
Who has 10 hits in the game. Lindholm sends it in, and it's Pasternak scores! Series winner for David Pasternak and the Bruins.
The Maple Leafs have now gone 57 years without a Stanley Cup. The Montreal Maroons have won a 3rd-round series more recently than the Leafs have, and the Maroons haven't played in 85 years. Despite 13 Cup wins, the Leafs have never seen 4 rounds in a playoff run, and Vegas did that in their first year. So obviously, the Leafs need to do something different. Any team in the league would be blessed to have the players that Toronto does, and somehow they ruin it every single year.